So I'm going to introduce David here. He's been here for 25 years, you said?
I can't believe it.
I know.
Yeah.
Manitou's an
It goes
awesome
fast.
place.
It's a nice place, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we deal with the parking. David's been a graphic designer and has production experience for 35 plus years.
Plus.
Plus years. 20 years of teaching experience, which, boy, kudos for that. 30 plus years of fine art creation. And I know from personal experience watching him that he helped Rockey develop his beautiful book that I'm sure a couple of you have, which is an amazing, amazing thing. So I personally want to thank you for that.
Sure.
And you went to the University of Colorado at Boulder, so you're a Colorado native.
That's right. Born in Boulder, went to CSU and CU with degrees in art. Always been connected to art in some way or another.
Absolutely. Excuse me. And taught at Colorado Springs Early Colleges, CTU, Pikes Peak Community College, School of Visual Arts, with Quark. That's an antique.
Quark was before InDesign, and it was right along there with PageMaker. And Quark was a Denver-based company.
It was, yeah.
And the founders, Tim Gill, created a gay foundation. I believe they have an office here in Colorado Springs.
Office in downtown
Yeah.
Colorado Springs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Quark was the thing to do because you could specify things in fractions of a point instead of a full point.
Mm-hmm.
It's very specific.
I used to have it. It was awesome. Wow, your client list is too long to list, but lots of people in Colorado Springs, including, of course, Rockey, the Millabo Art Theater, the Business of Arts Center, the Biological Sciences Curriculum Study,
Mm-hmm.
Performing Arts for Youth, and New York City, Pentagram Design Services, Ralph Lauren Home Collection, so that's pretty cool. Jones and Company. Wow, David.
I was a freelancer. So yeah, I was a freelancer, and so you could get gigs. So even though I said I did something for Ralph Lauren, it was like a 2-day or a 4-day project doing illustrations. So yeah,
that's okay.
So yeah.
So please give us a little applause for David.
Thank you for being here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the exhibit, about Rockey, a little bit about Manitou Springs. And so let's see if I can make this thing go. The name of the show was Portraits of Manitou, Paintings, Drawings, Etchings, Town Scenes, Buildings, Parks, and Bridges. Sponsored by the restaurant, Crystal Park Cantina, and Manitou Springs Real Estate. Here is where we are. And it didn't look like this about 2 weeks ago. They just put the stucco up there, and it's really solid. And so when they put this up here, they had to hammer onto the building screen. So for 2 days, bam, 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 bam. So very loud to be here. I actually have a. So the reason this exhibit might exist is because I have a studio upstairs, and Mike Mayo, a year ago, said, "Hey, why don't you do an exhibit with us?" And so I, probably just because of proximity, this exhibit came about. And so for a very short amount of time, the people were concerned with the rain. And so they covered the scaffolding with this thing to protect the newly applied stucco from the rain. And so this is what it looks like to look out the window. And the city has done such a nice promotion. They're actually pointing people to the Heritage Center. Turn left here to go to the Heritage Center. I just made that up today because, yeah, so there's the cog train. And that's been going for what, 1893? Something like that? Yes. Long time. Yeah. And so on the plaque it says that the world's most famous mountain was discovered by Zebulon Pike in November of 1806. Other than that, before that, it had never been discovered. Yeah. And so anyway, I thought it was unusual that at some point somebody claimed that Pikes Peak was the most famous mountain. The world's most famous mountain, not just Colorado's. Yeah, so you got to toot your horn every once in a while. Across the street, the incline has become so popular that they're telling you, don't park here for the incline. You have to go somewhere else. There's a hotline to park in the right place for the incline. Parking is an issue. We recently have gone this backwards parking here.
Yeah.
I was amazed. Why are they painting lines backwards? But it seems to work. And so kind of pricey to park across the street. And so here's a view of literally across the street. Rockey did paintings like this, and here is one of his paintings. A long time ago, you can see City Hall. So basically, this is a Rockey painting from across the street. Let's see here. I want to thank some people. Deborah Harrison, one of the founders of the Manitou Springs Heritage Center, along with Jean Garrity and Michelle Anthony. And Jean donated or has supplied one of the very important pictures that are historic. Michael Mayo, he came up with the idea. Neil Mensch, I call him the go-to guy at the Heritage Center. Lynn, who does exhibit Shirley Archives. Natalie Johnson, she is director of the Manitou Art Center. She created, I believe, the MAC grants, of which the Rockey Art Museum has gotten two. So Natalie Johnson has changed the community in terms of why can the Heritage Center afford stucco? MACH grants. Lana Elliott is the person who sort of runs the Rockey Art Museum. If you visit the Rockey Art Museum, it'll be Lana that will give you the tour. And if you've got 45 minutes, she'll take up 45 minutes telling you great stories about Rockey's art and his process and things like that. So let's see here. The exhibit. So by the way, here is a very quick video of the windy day when the storm might have been coming along here. And I was reminded of an artist named Christo. And Christo was famous for wrapping things. And one of his early projects was in Colorado. It was called the Valley Curtain. And it was up in Rifle. And he suspended a very large amount of orange fabric across the curtain. But unlike what you see today with large pieces of fabric with slots between them so the wind can pass through it, this thing caught the wind, tore, and was up for 2 days instead of 2 weeks. Okay, and so he would fund his projects by doing drawings. This is 72. He started in 60, 63 as a pop artist. He was doing small wrappings, wheelbarrows, storefronts. Then he got bigger, more famous until he started wrapping parks. And Christine, you went to New York City to see the gates, didn't you?
Gates,
yeah.
Yeah, and they were flappable.
They were movable. Yeah, right. Yeah. So he did a fence in California, 25 miles long, 8 feet tall. He wrapped bridges in Paris and islands in Miami and the gates in Central Park. And one of the projects he was going to do was to do a series of draped fabric over the Arkansas River down in Canyon City. And that is not going to happen. He passed away along with his wife. But that was going to be quite the art project, not too far from here. So anyway, I'm just rambling, making an art history connection there.
Can I just add, if anybody remembers, when he was starting up that project in Arkansas, he and his wife came here to Manitou to promote it. I think they were at the BAC.
Oh, really? He gave a talk.
Yeah, he came and his wife came and gave a talk on it.
How about that?
He was here.
Interesting. He had an exhibit when I went to CSU, and they brought in fabric and all of his drawings and things like that. So it's quite cool. One of the ways that this exhibit is set up is with a map. So the idea was, okay, let's have a show of Rockey's work, and let's make it about Manitou. And so let's do significant historical buildings in Manitou. So we chose, of the hundreds and hundreds of Rockey paintings, buildings in Manitou or scenes in Manitou. So that's the theme of the show is places that Rockey painted in Manitou. So we've numbered the artworks so that you can see where he might have stood when he did some of these paintings. One of the things I'll talk about later is the density of work that he did within a few steps of his home. And what's interesting to me is that here you've got 1 through 6 here, and they're all very different images. You can go 2 blocks away from his house, turn one way, you've got a very interesting building to look at. You turn another way, there's another very interesting thing to look at. So one of the things that I was saying, what makes Manitou so paintable? It was such an interesting thing to paint. You've got these stacked hillsides, historic buildings, nature. You know, you go out to some other places like Metro Denver and you just got level ground. There's not much to paint. So Manitou is very paintable. So anyway, we've got a map that sort of coordinates the show. Let's see what this is. That's just the name of the show. Okay. We have historic pictures. And so I asked Deborah to provide some historic pictures to go along with the pictures that are in the show. So Deborah provided pictures that you see in black and white next to pictures. This is a really cool picture of Rockey's building and the town clock. And the first few pictures you see are of the town clock. What an easy thing for you to look out his window, step outside, he's painting the town clock. And so it was a brick building, it was a drugstore, and the park has been rearranged many times, where there's railings, where there's sidewalks and things like that. So replanted and rearranged many times. And Deborah restored the clock, and there was a picture.
Yes, I did it single-handedly. I flew in. Yes, there was a group of us on the Historic Preservation Commission, and the clock was looking pretty sad. It had white plastic bezels with a black dial with numbers, and it was white, which was sculptural, but not the original color. So 4 of us, Jean Garrity, Michelle Anthony, myself, and Nancy Hankin, the 4 of us restored it. And got the Centennial Chapter 100 of the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors to do the clock faces, because they were originally, as we see in this picture, and this picture is actually the one we used to restore the clock. Because at the time, it was the only one we had. We couldn't find any others that were so wonderful. And a helicopter brought in the statue, took it down. Nancy painted it. She's a set decorator, and so she painted that, and the helicopter brought it back in. The only thing we didn't do is we didn't put the water back, because, modern health code. Yeah. And when you think about it, in the old days, it was just recirculating, and everybody had tuberculosis, so that wasn't a good idea. But this clock was given to the city by Jerome Wheeler, whose estate used to sit where the post office is now, and his bowling alley, shooting gallery, and guest quarters is in one of the big paintings that Rockey did. The clock's been an inspiration. It was a pretty nice gift, we all think, and has finally stood the test of time. And the green color is the original color. And then the drugstore behind it, that was Dr. Isaac Davis, who moved to town in 1872. So that's pretty much at the beginning. And this was his second drugstore. His first drugstore is where the Library of Lawn is now. And he was the county coroner, so this was his drugstore. That was the county mortuary. And the top floor was the morgue.
Wow.
Because he had a funeral home business. So.
Wow.
But that didn't last for long. And so in this current picture, it's Lennon Drug Company. It was a drug company. All the different druggists used this building for years and years. And obviously, it's still beautiful today. And Rockey must have liked it because he lived there. Right?
We've got a lot to say about that.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I won't say it.
I've zoomed in to some of the picture here, and you can see the 2 people sitting over on the left, some signage there, telegraphs postal telegraph office, cables, candy, sundries, things like that. In the window, you can see two women in the shop there. Up in the upper left-hand corner in the window, you can see there's a sign, rooms for rent, a chiropractor on the second floor. The drugs sign looks to me like it's lit at night. It might have lights that light up at night. Here's the base of the fountain. Looks a lot like that. Here she is there.
That's Hebe, the god, the cupbearer to the gods. That's
Okay.
why she has her cup.
Shebe or Hebe?
It's Hebe, Hebe.
Okay.
And of course, I'm sure the Greeks pronounce it differently. It's just different.
And so a guy was here yesterday saying that the town is now fixing the clock, so it does tell the time. Right now, it tells the time perfectly twice a day.
It got restored in 1990, so it's been a while. It's due for it. And I just wanted to point out real quick, those people sitting on the bench.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I won't say.
Sure. Go ahead.
No, it's just
Oh,
like,
these two guys?
yeah. It's
They're
like,
not sitting on the bench. They're sitting on the base of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. But apparently it was always a tradition to sit in front of this building.
Oh, really? It's a great place to sit,
That's right.
for sure. Another picture in the exhibit is the Barker House. This is a posed picture. When you zoom in, you see that there are people standing facing the camera, as well as the people on the balcony and the horses. Yeah. So I just thought this notion of horseless carriages was the first name for a car. And just like right now, a lot of people have wireless phones. So anyway, that's some of the historical pictures. So speaking of history, right across from the Rocky Art Museum is the Commonweal. You can see that this opening used to be a window or a door for something else. And so
It was
next,
the loading dock.
it was a loading dock. Yeah, so very good. So one of the things, the reason I took about this picture is just to show you how much time might have passed between 1890 and 1940. It's a mere 50 years. And if you're using this door for 50 years, you start to wear down the base of the door. So in the alley, you can see that somebody was going through this door a lot, right? So I just thought that was kind of an interesting picture there.
They used to deliver groceries a lot here. I wish they still did. But, so they use those entrances a whole lot.
Yeah. One of the things that was interesting to me in those pictures, how steep it went down behind those buildings to the creek. And it's been raised up a little bit, but that used to be a very steep hill to get down to that creek. One of the other things that since that we're dealing with maps and buildings in Manitou, I was told about these maps by a company called Sanborn, and Sanborn actually has a company still in Colorado Springs that makes maps. And I think they originally made maps with the context of insurance. What was the heat? What was the structure of the building? And so this company made maps indicating what the structure of the building was and how it was heated and if it had electricity or things like that.
And they also, who used it.
Oh, who
So
it
they
was?
have special codes for certain companies that maybe had an extra fire risk. And they also had a special code for like houses in prostitution.
Okay.
They were female dormitories.
So in a way, these historic maps are, in a sense, a good indication of what the building was used for. And so they did these maps every 10 years or so. And this is the map that's for this current show. So what I did is I took these different maps and I overlaid them, scaled them so they all registered with each other, because some were vertical, some were horizontal, and so you had to kind of register them. And so I'm going to show you the 1886 map of Manitou Springs, and this triangle is going to become the town clock. And here you've got the bathhouse. This is Canyon Avenue. So town clock's going to become right here, and the Rocky Art Museum building at 10 Canyon Avenue has yet to be built. There are gaps between buildings. And so one of the things that you see on some of these labels is the word livery. which is a place where you kept your horses and carriage. So a lot of the things here are related to horses, right?
Well,
Barns, wagons, liveries, and things like that. So that's 1886, and then overlaid on that as you go to about, I think, 14 years later, and you can see now that they've divided the town clock. You can see that this is a triangle here. They built a bridge over here. The buildings have all filled in. And so you've got labels like Barker's Hotel. The streets are named. And interestingly enough, on what is going to become the library is a bunch of buildings, a Chinese laundry, a drugstore, which is the drugstore that eventually becomes Rockey's building.
Dr. Davis's first drugstore.
Yeah. And so here you've got your original Manitou school here, and here is the church that Rockey attended, the First Congregational Church. In the exhibit is the Sunnyside Hotel. It's in the upper right-hand corner over, and that was torn down in 87. So Rockey painted that, maybe 84, 85, something like that. And now that's the parking lot for the First Congregational Church. So that was standing until 1987.
Right.
Yeah. So that is a picture of a building now gone, painted by Rockey. So that's 1900. And then we go to 1910, and let's see here if I can zoom out a little bit. So the park, the library has become a park. All those buildings got torn down.
Actually, it was a park. The city bought the property and tore the buildings down with the intention of putting a library.
Okay, so the plan.
So it's already been set aside for a library. They just needed to get the money from Mr. Carnegie.
Mr. Carnegie, okay.
Carnegie's great-grandfather went directly to Mr. Carnegie and said, "Give us the money." And he said, "Your town is too small, 1,400 people." And he said, "Well, but we have lots of tourists." And so Mr. Carnegie said, "Sure," and gave him a check.
Gene Garrity's grandfather, great-grandfather, went to Mr. Carnegie directly,
Personally.
said, "Build us a library."
Yes.
Amazing. So here you can see from 1900 to 1910, St. Andrew's Church, which was over here and is now designated as a reading room, has been built here. So this is the St. Andrew's Church here. So now we're going to go forward to 1925. Yes.
Real quick, that the reading room, that was the original St. Andrew's Church.
Right,
And
yes.
it used to be on this side of the road.
Uh-huh.
And then when the bottling plant and bottling in general got bigger, Major Hulbert, a local entrepreneur, picked it up and moved it across the street and spun it around.
You picked up the building?
He picked up
Yeah.
not personally, I think picked it up, moved it across the street, and turned it around. So it faced the other direction.
Another thing, here's the 10 Canyon Avenue. One of the things that you're going to see here is that the street numbering changed. So at one point, this was 200 Manitou. In fact, this building might have been 113 Manitou Avenue. It's now 517. Next door was 111 Manitou Avenue, and now it's 515.
They've changed the addresses at least twice.
Oh, they did, the numbering. And so at one point, what is now 10 Canyon Avenue was considered 106, and they started the numbering right about here, switching. Where does Canyon Avenue start? Right about here. And so then if we look at 1925, there's something interesting that happens here, and that is instead of making a totally new map, they simply put patches over the 1910 map. So for 15 years, they didn't make a new map, and so you can see a few changes here where the empty library lot has a library on it. The elementary school in the lower right-hand corner has a new library school. Has been built. So it's sort of interesting to see this time sequence through Sanborn maps, which I didn't know about until about a week ago. So kind of interesting. The other thing you can see here in the upper right-hand corner in the inset is that in 1910, this is the Denver and Rio Grande, and then these are called a bowling alley. Is that right? And then 10 years later, actually, yeah, and we go there. Then the Denver Rio Grande is now the Villa Motel. See, this is an inset here. This is Manitou Avenue. So you get the idea, right? It's not continuous. And now this is called a bowling alley. So
That's
anyway.
Hiawatha Gardens.
That's Hiawatha Gardens. Yeah,
That's
this
Hiawatha Gardens.
is where the former Chase Bank is, right on the corner.
It used to be a
and-
saloon.
Yeah. So anyway, so some interesting history there on this map that where you can just literally overlay the different maps on each other and see the town kind of develop over time. Let's see. Really quick, who is Rockey? I'm going to go ahead and go to, I have to change this settings here, so go like this. There's a setting in Acrobat where you can make it fit the window. So here he is, a young high school student. Here he is as a young college student. He grew up in Evergreen. He went to the Chicago Art Institute. Here he is in front of the Chicago Art Institute. The Chicago Art Institute is kind of in back of the Art Institute of Chicago, so I believe this is in front. So I think in 1960, you could be a student and have your poster in front of, not behind, in another building. So here's Rockey in front of the student art exhibit at the Chicago Art Institute. Very, very formidable place, Chicago Art Institute. Early on, his work, and one of the things I want to do in the future is kind of catalog his style through time. And early on, he was sort of into a geometric abstraction style. So here you can see a relief that's sort of geometric. Here he is, some college dinner with friends. He gets married, moves to Colorado, has 4 children, builds a pond in his backyard. Here is Rose, his wife, with Ivan and Noah, I believe. And then he buys a former laundromat and lives in there. And then he calls it the Quilted Bed Studio, Rockey and Sons Art Proprietors. And he had about 4 or 5 different studios or gallery names. And so he built this truck, he kind of anticipated tiny homes, building a cabin. And so I asked Ken and Tina Reister if they ever got into this thing with him, and they said once or twice, and when we did, the windows would be flapping open and closed while we were driving down the street. So anyway, here is Rockey with his family here in front of the cabin. I don't know if has any of you been around long enough to know see the red camper truck?
I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Just when I moved here.
Yeah.
They kind of fell
So,
out.
How long ago would that be?
1975, something like that.
I would have seen that.
Yeah.
That looks familiar.
He was a teacher at North Junior High for many years, and interestingly enough, on the Manitou Art Center building is a very large picture of Floyd Tunson. And I did some searches at Google Gazette for Rockey, and you get all these articles. And in 1971, Rockey complained that Floyd Tunson was hired to be the high school teacher, while Rockey had to stay the junior high teacher. And he actually said, "I am going to file a suit, reverse racial discrimination." And so it did not. Nothing came to pass of it. But I find it ironic that in Manitou Springs, with the person who Rockey sort of had an argument with, is a huge mural of this other person named Floyd Tunson, sort of the other spectrum, let's say, of teachers in Manitou Springs. So Floyd Tunson's a pop artist, doesn't do landscapes or things like that, has had several shows at the Fine Arts Center. So here he is as a teacher. Somebody gave him an art cake. Here he is with his granddaughter, Anadia. He had a puppy for 17 years, constant companion. Named puppy. He won a Manny Award, and he's holding a vase by Ken and Tina Reister, who they were a great set of friends there, painted a lot together. Here he is holding the Love Songs book that he and I worked on for about 13 years, published in about 2014. Can't believe it's almost 10 years since then. Here's an interesting picture of Rockey. And this is with a person by the name of Marty Yaslowitz. And Marty, I think, was a co-founder of the Commonweal. And he was a potter. And so here's Rockey with his smirk, holding a cigarette. And what they've done is created a mock contemporary sculpture. They're doing this all in fun. they're smiling and they're making a joke out of contemporary art. This is next to the town clock, which was at the time painted white. Here's his building over here. And this is sort of a contemporary collage-y kind of thing. And I think it's all as a joke. So that's an interesting picture of Rockey in front of his building. Any questions or comments about that or anything so far? Why was Rockey so well known? Among other things, he lived in one place for many, many, many years, but the other thing, he lived on the first floor. And most people don't live on the first floor in a commercial. You live on the second and third floor, your store's on the first floor. So he was always visible. Here he is in his window. Here he is on his bench. And then here he is with his son, Ivan, and his 2 or 3 kids. And he's just out there as if it's his front yard, right? And so he's very accessible. And so that's one of the reasons I think that Rockey was so well known, is because he was in the center of town and he lived on the first floor. Not many people do that. Rockey, this is by the way here, speaking of the library, in 1910 they celebrated the 100-year anniversary of it. They took pictures of him and maybe other people promoting the idea of reading. Here he is at his round table reading a book, which is basically a picture book of Arthur Rackham. So he's more looking at a book. But Rockey, I don't think people knew how intelligent Rockey was. He did a lot of writing, got a master's degree in teaching. And so he did a lot of writing. But in 2010, I was asked by the librarian at the time to come up with a little logo. So this is going back to my graphic design experience. And so for a year or two, I created a little Manitou Springs Public Library 100-year collaboration there. And then I just used the idea of an open book there, sort of as a fountain there. And so that lasted for about a year or two until I think the Manitou Springs Library became the Pikes Peak Library at some point. Who knows when that was?
It was, what, like 12, 15 years ago?
Yeah.
It was in 2012.
2012.
Okay.
So that's only 2 years after this that it joined up with the Pikes Peak
Yeah,
Library.
I was on the board of directors at the time and part of the campaign to
Yeah.
get it to be part of PPLD.
Yeah. So
The
there's...
city couldn't afford funding.
Uh-huh. So anyway, that's a side note there. Rockey was not a good cook. This is a picture of him cooking. I think that's one of his daughters there. Here he is, a bachelor, and so he was a bachelor for all of his time in Manitou Springs. And in fact, he was married over by Memorial Park, and Rose got divorced, and he moved here as a bachelor. And he kind of says he found himself in terms of landscape when he moved to Manitou Springs. And so, as I said earlier, I'm going to try to document the styles that he went through. Part of this exhibit is, not part of it, all of this exhibit is images of Manitou, and for the most part, all of the images were done on-site plein air. Rockey was always out with his easel painting Manitou Springs. And so these are pictures of him out painting. This is Mansions Park behind the City Hall. This is up on Washington Avenue. Just behind him here, you can see the Wheeler Building down here. He did many paintings from up on high. One of the things that I find interesting about this canvas is how rough it is. This is not a tightly composed picture yet, is it? And so this is going to become a nice landscape with recognizable buildings, but that is kind of a messy start, I would say. Not to criticize Rockey, but he was always outdoors. Now this picture is interesting because it has another piece of artwork in it, and he's on Canyon Avenue and he's painting the Nolan House, which is just up the street from the post office box, the post office, and it's been turned into condos. Right, there's about 4 expensive condos, and so that is interesting to me. This particular, he's got his radio there, and he's got a stool. And so Ken and Tina were telling me that at some point somebody bought him an easel. He didn't even have an easel at some point. So here he is outdoors sketching, and then this photograph and the painting for it is in the exhibit of him painting the Wheeler House. So this is a Tina picture of him painting with Puppy. This is a picture by Tina of him painting, and then this is a picture of him painting in the snow or cold, wearing a coat. So Tina and Ken would often go out with them, and then this is a picture by Rockey that includes Ken painting outdoors in Manitou Springs on a snowy, sunny day. So anyway, the notion there is Rockey is painting outdoors, and he would go back, and they would go back several times. And one of the things that enabled plein air painting was, and the entire Impressionist movement, was the idea of holding oil paint in tubes. Before that, you couldn't go out and about with your oil paint. You couldn't store it. So with that invention of how to store paint in tubes, which we have some over there in the display case, you could go out and paint plein air. So Impressionism, in part, came about with the invention of oil paint stored in tubes. And so Ken and Tina told me recently that they would sometimes go back to the same. This didn't necessarily happen in one day. They might go back several days to take the pictures.
Can I just point out real quick? That's my house, the yellow house there.
The yellow house? This
Yeah,
one?
it's on, and the house to the right, that's Mike Miles.
Okay, so that's great. That would be another thing to do, is to document all the places in Manitou where people have their houses. Cool. Thank you. This talk is going well, by the way. I get nervous about things not flowing and skipping around, so far so good. One of the things that when I worked with Rockey that impressed me most, or one of the main things, not one of the, there's so many things you could say about Rockey, were his hands. So everything that you see ever made by Rockey flowed through his hands, right? And so his hands were just these twisty, you could just tell so much had happened through those hands. So I captured some pictures of him, and all these pictures of him paying very close attention to what he's doing, eye-hand coordination at work. Here's that same picture with him and his granddaughter. Here he is drawing, I believe, perhaps could be on a church bulletin. He was notorious for going to the church and drawing on the church bulletin while he was in church. Not that this is in church, but aren't those interesting hands? Yeah, just decades of making art. He was certainly dedicated to being an artist. That's, if you ask him who he was and what he was, the first thing he'd tell you was he was an artist. So let's take a look at what he had to say about his making art. He had two shows at the Business of Art Center, now the Manitou Art Center, one in '92 and one in 2001. And in the 2001 brochure, which is where I got to know him first, I was on staff part-time there. And when they had that show, they needed a brochure. They printed 2,000 or more, and then they sent that out. But it wasn't just an invitation, it was an essay. And so the title of that show was called Art Is. And this is the first sentence in that brochure. Art is an action, not an object. And so he talks about the process as being important and the relationship of the artist to their artwork, right? And Rockey was notoriously against money and did not like to sell his work. And so he rarely had shows. And when he did, it was such a large distance between the shows, there was a lot of demand. So I'll let you read that for a second. Yeah, so certainly art was a way of life for Rockey. Here's a quote. This is the idea of he's painting on site. He had the relationship of what he's painting and what he's observing, and not going back to his studio and painting something that he's not in front of. He talks about getting involved, so involved that everything around him becomes, the cold temperatures, all this other stuff. He kind of gets into the zone, let's say. He was a well-liked character. He loved Manitou, and he always had a lot to promote about it. This is from within one of the essays, and being a teacher, he's able to define, styles and materials and things like that. And so he liked to say that he experimented with realism, abstraction, and non-objective art. And he liked to say that he chose abstraction, but I think he was really more towards a realism than abstraction. But he has what he calls three different categories. Landscapes, double images where something can be two things at once, and then fantasy, which is what most of the book Love Songs is made up of, is fantasies. Fantasies, which you could say are characters that have a story that with them. This show has no characters in it. It has no story with it. It's just places, right? So the Love Songs book is mostly about characters or fantasy characters. One of the things that he doesn't list here is, and I'm hoping that we can do this in the future over at the museum, is to have a show of his portraits. He was an excellent portrait painter, and there's plenty of them. So I think in addition to that, there could be figurative portrait work there. So anyway, I want to just go real quickly into this idea of something, since I teach art appreciation, a notion of what is abstraction and what is representation. And so Mondrian is a good example of the transition of one person's career from representation to abstraction to non-objective art. Okay, so he started out, as everybody else was before Cubism, painting representational scenes. And then Cubism came along in 1910, 11, 12, you start to do abstraction, which is sort of recognizable, but it's moving into stylized things, right? And then if you go very far away from anything that represents anything, you end up with non-objective art, which means that it's not a picture of anything in the world. It's pure art. It's just lines, shapes, and color. It is not a picture of something else, right? It's just the art. Whereas these things in the middle sort of could remind you of things like a tree or something like that. So that is arranged. So I created a what you would call it a transition, a numeric transition. So you could be over on the left, and then you could kind of move over to the center, and then you could end up way over here on the right, where nothing is recognizable, right? So there's this idea of, so Rockey says that he's sort of in this area over here. I like the abstraction, but I feel like Rockey's pretty much over here in the 9s, 8s, and 7s in terms of everything that's in this show. I wouldn't say that there's much abstraction over there. The other thing that Rockey did talk about a lot, and this is when he went to Ohio State, was the idea of phenomenology and these levels at which you could understand art. And so the first level is sort of just looking at it from elements and principles. What are the line? What are the colors? Is there space? That kind of thing, pure formally. And then the next one is what is being representation, what it is that is being represented. Then you go to one that is what is the meaning of it. And then the fourth level is like taking it all together and bringing it all together in what he calls the total expression. And so that is very much part of several of the essays in the Love Songs book. about how to understand the different levels of art. So he preached that a lot in his description of what art making was about. Artworks. Let me just show you one artwork that is from the 1992 exhibit. This is a 6-panel painting. I believe each panel is approximately, has anyone seen this? Is it about 4 feet tall? In other words, how big, has anyone seen the original of this? No?
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. So this was from 1992. This is his building. He's up on the hill behind his building where the apartments that just got renovated off of Washington, where Lafayette drops down. And so he's up on the hill. He's looking down over Manitou. Here's St. Andrew's Church, Commonweal, his building. Over there is the Wheeler building. And what's cool about this is I took the poster to a local blueprint shop downtown on Nevada. I had them scan it at high res. What that enables me to do is with my high res file here, I can now go in here and I can scroll around as if I was in front of the picture here. And so interestingly enough, here is the First Congregational Church. Here is the library with the elementary school in the background. Here is the Wheeler building. And then here's basically the back of Manitou Avenue. And then here is a house that is one of the etchings on that wall right there. It's called Jan's Tree. And here is the house. Doug Groh currently owns this building. Cheyenne, his son, lives there with his son. And so Doug Groh, giving you some news from Manitou, this week in the alley on the 2 doors that come out onto Lover's Lane, installed red brick pavers so that instead of just door, dirt, alley, we now go door, pavers, alley. So that's news from Manitou Springs on Lover's Lane in terms of new recent improvements to the town. One of the things that's interesting about, and so I was asking it again, Ken and Tina Reister are very close to him, and they painted with him many, many, many times. And so Tina was saying, I'm in that picture. I don't know which panel it is. But one of the things, so this is the back of his building. One of the things that is kind of interesting about this, when you zoom in here, you can see, oh, there's a person looking out over the bridge to the stream. And then you go a little bit further. Oh, there's somebody walking down the stairs. Oh, there's somebody on the balcony over here. Oh, there's somebody going into their shed, right? And so I think this is Rockey saying, I don't want it to just be buildings. I want to get some people in there and make it personalized. So this is kind of cool to go in here and look at individual strokes. So Tina was saying that she thinks this took him most of a summer to do. He would go up there, and it's such a big panorama, I believe that he would take up one panel at a time to do that. So kind of a cool painting of Manitou Springs. And this was the poster for the 1992 show.
Are you saying you don't know where that painting is?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I heard that it was bought by, I think there might have been an auction house called Kemper Galleries. I don't know. I heard that person owned it at one point. So it is a big painting, isn't it? And so each one of these is its own panel. I'm going to guess 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall. So I don't know if this is 12 feet long or not. It's a big painting, a significant painting, obviously, of Manitou Springs. How far away is it from Rockey's house? Steps. He takes his easel, walks up the hill, sets up the easel, paints it, right? He doesn't get in the car. He walks out his building, goes ahead and paints it. So other places that, oh, by the way, I was up there the other day, and I just decided to take a quick scan of it with my camera. There's too many trees to see what he saw there, but this is sort of what it looks like today. You can see there's the library, the elementary school, the Wheeler building, and then that's about where his house is. Then you can see the front of Manitou Avenue there. Other artworks by Rockey. Another painting from that hill is a painting that is somewhat reminiscent of a Van Gogh painting. And Van Gogh was certainly one of his heroes. He wrote an essay as a student in 1960 about the relationship of Van Gogh to his art. And so a lot of people associate him with Van Gogh. And so here's the back of his building, and then you can see the town clock here, right there in Manitou Avenue, lit up at night. And Van Gogh-like stars in the upper corner here. And one of the things that you could see about a lot of Rockey's skies were very busy, twirling sky-like feature that was, I would say, is influenced by Van Gogh. Here is the building, moonlight of his building, and that's in the show. That's not an original. That's a digital print of the original, which is at the Rockey Art Museum. This is a picture of the Rockey Art Museum. And so when he passed away, in his will, he said to his two surviving children, Noah and Hannah, "Thou shalt make a nonprofit for me, and thou shalt not sell any of my work, and thou shalt try to preserve my work in one place as best you can. Go to it." He didn't do that much prep for all of that, and so fortunately, what's great about the Rockey Art Museum is it's already there. It's full of his artwork. It's got a great location. And so in a sense, it was an easy thing to establish the Rockey Art Museum nonprofit because so much was already in place. So we didn't have to find a building or put work in it. So very lucky for that. And so Lana is the person who greets people, and we fund it through the sale of prints and etchings and things like that. In fact, the 4 etchings in this show were purchased by Michael Mayo. And so those are part of his private collection. So I encourage you to visit the Rockey Art Museum. We're only open 3 days a week right now, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in the afternoons. And Lana, like I say, will give you a tour. So he's painted Miramont. This is looking down Ruxton with Tubby's turnaround on the right-hand side. You're about to head up Ute Pass. This is a stream. It could be Soda Springs Park, but what I want to point out here is the busy, active hundreds and hundreds of lines. Look how much effort he's putting into over and over and over. And so what differentiates the bush from the tree is the kind of line that he used. Short curly strokes versus long wavy strokes, right? And this takes years and years and years to do over and over and over again. So not only was Rockey a good painter, he was a good drawer. In fact, his drawings a lot of times were the basis for his paintings. So isn't that a beautiful drawing, right? And so that's one of hundreds. And so it's like a musician or a athlete. You got to do things over and over and over and over again. And so that's just, you could call that masterful. This is, Deborah, you should know this. This is looking down Lafayette. And so we're about to head down Lafayette off of Washington. This is the first house on the left. And there's his church right there. And then in the distance, you can see the further distance there. Yeah. So this is, if you were to go there, you'd say, wow, how did he come up with that? In other words, he could invent interesting pictures out of ordinary places, right? He could choose and make things quite interesting. So this is looking down Lafayette. This is the Dutch kitchen. This is the Barker house on the left. He did a series of monochromatic prints. This is a neighborhood somewhere. Somebody like... you could go ahead and, oh, that's my house over there. I'm on the right, and that kind of thing. So I'm sure someone would recognize their house if you showed it to them. One of the things that I wanted to show in the exhibit, but didn't, is some of his what I call house portraits. Just neat line drawings of some of the houses in Manitou Springs. Pardon?
Isn't that the Gillis Brothers house?
This one?
Not Rexton?
Could be.
Setback.
Yeah, see, you recognize some of these houses.
The 2 brothers who married 2 sisters and lived in a duplex.
Of course. Why would they live in a triplex? So the Gillis brothers married two twins.
Well, they weren't twins. Well, I think, yeah, the wives were.
The
2
wives were-
brothers married 2 women who were sisters.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and moved here from Nova Scotia.
More paintings of Manitou Springs by Rockey. Here's one of Miramont Castle. This is Illinois Avenue. This is the promenade on Manitou Avenue. This is looking to this is the Hiawatha Gardens on the left. From the park, this is the raised platform over here where the Duclos sculpture is. And then over here is the Villa Motel in the background. This is, I believe, prior to the flood when the houses behind Mansion Park were torn down because their foundations had shifted because of the...
It's up on Washington, that house.
Okay, sorry. So this is Mansions Park, right? And I find it interesting. There's no fence there right now. There's a bunch of fence. You can't see that. You can't see through it that well because there's so much. There's a beautiful garden there right now. There's a community group that does the garden. But this is Lover's Lane. And right to the left here is the parking lot. City Hall's over here. And this is the steep hillside. And so these houses are no longer here. I'm really going off on a tangent here. Somebody along the Lover's Lane at the end has carved a curved driveway attempting to build a house there. And I don't know if he got permission to or not, but it's a super steep driveway that comes right down onto Lover's Lane, and then 5 inches beyond that is the creek. So if you got there on a snowy winter's day with ice, you'd be saying, "I hope I can stop."
It's for sale now, so
Yeah.
I guess he's not going to do it.
Anyway, somewhere in this picture is a current piece of property for sale. This is up on Spencer Avenue. In the lower right-hand corner is the cottage owned by Dan Wex and Deborah Thornton. So as you come around and you drop down onto Spencer.
That was Major Holbert's meeting space.
This was?
Yeah, the house down on Grand,
Yes.
which used to be a big Victorian, but
Yes.
now it's more of a Southwestern.
Yeah.
And these two buildings were in the back, and one was a garden shed, and one was where all the little local organizations had their meetings.
All right. Interesting. Yeah. And so yet another Rocky painting. This is looking up through his alley. His building's on the left, Commonweal's on the right, the Barker House. Looking up at Pikes Peak. This is a bridge, where is that? Off of Manitou Avenue. Is that by the, is that the spa building on the left?
Yes, so that's,
So that comes, yeah. So by the way, this building.
it's the spring house.
Yeah, back in that corner is a picture of this bridge from this angle, showing that shop hanging over that. So this is another angle of that same bridge. Here he is up on the hill, or a hill from a different place. Barker House and the bank. Here's the church across the street on a sunny day, and then. Pardon, I think it's St. Andrews. Yeah. A close-up of Miramont. Again, here he is up on that hillside. There is the Wheeler building on the left. Town view from across Manitou Avenue. Another bridge. So this is the second bridge, I think. The Mate Factor is right here.
You can see the
That's
first
the long
bridge.
row. The first bridge is in the background. That's a spa building.
You can wash or
Yes, so good question. He had a style that he would draw and then he would color it with an ink and wash. So he did oil paintings, but then stylistically he also did drawings. So for instance, the two library pictures, the lower picture is an ink drawing that's been colorized. So it's more of a drawing than a painting. So very good question. This is more of a drawing. A little bit of watercolor, I think. Yeah, sort of a wash that would kind of go underneath the lines. Yeah. This is an early thing. I think this is a Rocky, but look how crude that is. It doesn't have all the detail, but it is the Barker House on the left. But it does show you or indicate to you the style of drawing or the process of drawing with an ink and then adding color to it. So that's some paintings by Rocky. This is just some photographs, etchings compared to what we can see today. This is the Mate Factor. This is the Soda Springs behind us. This is Ruxton going up here. So you can see that, who knows, he might have done that in the fall so that you can see through all of the buildings and things like that, but he certainly gave it a lot more interest and character with his line work than what you can do with a photograph. So that's an etching. This is behind Commonweal. The name of the print is Behind Barbs. and Barbara Reeves was the person who owned the building, and so that's why it's called Behind Barb's. And right down here, actually you can see it in this one, there was a bridge, and so Rocky and I for about 6 years had a studio, and that's where we spent about 6 years making that book. And so there was a flood, 2013, bridge got washed away, and I almost did as well. So I was fortunately able to escape after that flood. I was in the basement unwisely during that flood. So this is an etching, and this is literally behind his building. You walk out his building, you go down, you take a left, and there it is. And then this is just same place. You just turn right, and you look the other way. Okay, so this is looking up Washington Avenue, and so Lafayette, yeah. And so this is called Jan's tree, and Jan, I think, might have lived in the building or was a very good friend. I don't know why he called it Jan's tree. I think maybe Jan lived there before Doug. So just some comparisons of what Rocky saw and how he painted. It's interesting. Here's a challenge for you, or a task. Compare the two trees and see how the trees are similar or dissimilar from each other. That's some kind of fun thing to do. A couple things. I don't know if Rocky was being inventive with the eave of this building over here. He slanted it here. It doesn't look as slanted here. It doesn't look as wide. And so maybe Rocky was, I don't know if this was not a stone wall. Maybe it was just something else. So you could say that potentially Rocky here is doing a little bit of creative editing of the composition to look how much space we have here and how little space that we have here. And so this is where Rocky's doing some of that artistic editing to make it fit or make the composition fit a little bit better. So in other words, that's where the abstraction comes in, right? The ability to modify to make something fit into a composition. So interestingly enough, Rocky painted my house, and I didn't know it till I saw this painting 15 years after I knew him. But next door to my house is a much better known painting, and this painting has been on the menu at the Cliff House, and this person is named Gay at the time. She's moved away. But on Delaware Road and many roads, you either have a house that's above the street or below the street, right? And it's especially true in my neighborhood. I am below the street. There are other houses that are above the street on these steep hills. This house is below the street. So we're on the street. We're looking down the steps. Here is Gay right here tending to her flowers. And Gay was a gardener. And so I guess you could take her work home and do some gardening and take it out and things like that. But she was just crazy about planting flowers, so much so that she would cross the street to the neighbor's house and plant flowers in their yard. And so here's what it looks like now. Not the exact same angle, but you get a sense of what the angle is and what the house is. And then here is my house, which is, you just take a right here, you just look to the right, and here's what it looks like today. I could have moved the cars, but my house is past the cars. There's the cedar tree. And you can see somebody walking around the corner. So what you see here is the flowers on the right-hand side of the road are somebody else's property. But Gay, in addition to flowers, she put little crystal rocks and things like that. So she was very creative in her own way. So if Rocky was here, by the way, if I was to say, if Rocky had anything to do with the show, it would not look the same whatsoever. You know what I mean? He would do, not that one. No, I'll get this one over here, right? So I think Rocky would have made things a little bit different. And if Rocky was here, I think one of the things he would say about Gay is she's an artist, right? Because a lot of what his writings, anyone can be an artist. You can be a wood carver, you could be whatever. So he liked to say that anyone, no matter what you are or who you are, can find your art. So I think what Rocky would say about Gay, whereas I'm saying she's kind of crazy, is that, no, she's finding her art. She's finding her expression. So anyway, I found it interesting. So I asked Ken and Tina about this painting, and they were there also. And Tina's painting is owned by John Shada. And so many times when you see a painting by Rocky, sometimes there might be, in some cases, a corresponding picture. Not always, by Ken and or Tina. Ken and Tina, very close friends with Rockey, and I was in their shop, the Green Horse Gallery, and on the walls a week ago were some images that are similar to those that are in this show. Here's the Creek Spa building on your left, the buildings that kind of hang out over the edge. That's a Tina Reister. This reminded me of the Manitou Creek I showed you at the very beginning with the browns and whites with the snow. There's a picture of the town clock with the commonweal and the building on the right. Here's that same bridge again. Okay, so this is very similar, slightly different angle by Ken and Tina, and so here's St. Andrew's Church. So Ken and Tina have done wonderful pictures of Manitou Springs. I encourage you to go to their gallery, the Green Horse Gallery. And this is a Tina picture of Rockey. It's now hanging in one of the sponsors of this show, the Manitou Springs Real Estate Office, which is next door to Green Horse. Interesting connection there. The sponsor of this show has a painting in their lobby. And so this is a large 3-panel painting. And Tina said, I painted that in the studio with Rockey there. And so she painted this watching Rockey, and not in her studio, but she was sitting and standing there with Rockey posing there. And so anyway, things have been rearranged a little bit there, but there's Rockey in front of his in his studio there. Okay, how are we doing on time? Keep going a little bit, another 20 minutes or so? Yeah. Been more than an hour. I'm surprised it's gone that long. Couple quick things.
That picture where you showed him sitting at the table here.
Yes.
That's where I met him.
You met him at his table.
Yeah.
As many people probably did. Yeah. Yeah. Very accessible person. And, he was sort of a magnet. I was in his space many times, and the door would be open, and I'd be standing there, and other people would be standing there, and they'd be standing there, and they'd just go, there's Rockey. It's like you weren't even there anymore. And he was so magnetic, It's like he's such an interesting character, for sure. Very likable guy. He struggled a lot, lost 2 children, and went through a divorce, and was still super kind. Rockey did not like to sell his work. People would visit his place. Oh, I love that piece. And his response would, just give me your name. If I decide to sell it, I'll put your name in the back of the canvas. And if I sell it, I got your name and number. And so here we have a back of a canvas, obviously a good canvas. And so here we've got a 1, 2, 3. The first person is Pat Levy, then Margaret, then Becky. And then after that, he just stops numbering them. Right? Here's the 7th person. Here's number 7, right? And so on a lot of the canvases that are in his studio, and a couple in here maybe, there are names on the back of his canvas of people who might get the opportunity to buy the work if he ever wanted to sell it. So I thought that was sort of a fun thing that Rockey would do. He would literally put people's names. So here's the back of a canvas, and here's people's names on the back. Isn't that kind of fun? Yeah. So he did not sell his work, and unfortunately, he'd rather lend you his work than sell it. So he has a reputation, and it's true that he would lend people work rather than sell it to them. So we've got a bunch of work that has yet to be returned because it's been for a while. I've decided to take a walk and compare some works. This is at Adams Mountain Cafe. So if you want to look at more work, Cliff House, Adams Mountain Cafe, Congregational Church, all have work by him. And so I just went and just tried to find the scene that he painted. This is at the Penny Arcade. This is Soda Springs Park gazebo. And by the way, rambling on about local artists, Steve Wood did a great job at building a screen around this pavilion, a lightweight yet good barrier to keep people from hanging out in there when they don't want them in. So that's Steve Wood, and he's done a lot of local public art. I found this interesting. This has water that is flowing. It's in front of the Cliff House, and I thought it was interesting how it relates to the Hebby sculpture, our town clock.
They just added that this year, huh?
They just put this in recently.
Bigger. They've always had the fountain.
Yeah, it's brand new, or it's pretty new. Yeah, so that's at the Cliff House. So the Cliff House has work. I went over there. Martin managed the place, and I said, I need 2 pictures for this exhibit. He says, which ones? I took 2 of them, one of which is in the show. And he says, do you have any other pictures that don't have scaffolding in it? There's 4 pictures over at the Cliff House with the scaffolding on it because the place burned down and they had to renovate it. Chuck Murphy did it. And unfortunately, 4 of the pictures of the Cliff House with scaffolding are on display there. So I think Martin and everybody else at the Cliff House are getting tired of explaining why there's scaffolding on the Cliff House. This on the right is the Nolan House that we'll get to here in a second here. But there's the picture of that one scene. Here's the Wheeler House. By the way, Becky and Bill Weiss have loaned us that painting. And so that's part of a private collection there. This is looking down Manitou Avenue. There's the house there that I think I showed you a picture of that. Here's the view. That is the painting right over there. And the only reason I knew to do this is because the title of that painting is Cliff House from Firestone Room. And so I went back to Martin and I said, where is the Firestone Room? And can I go take a picture from it? And he says, yeah, it's one of our turret rooms. And so we went up there, and it is a beautiful room. It's one of the turrets at the Cliff House. And so I took a picture through the window, and that's pretty much identical with the picture of the Cliff House from the Firestone Room. And so kind of a cool room. Here's his building. There's the town clock. The recently renovated exterior, thanks in part to a mock grant. Match or mock? This is an M-A-C-H. Match? Match grant. Match for matching. By the way, matching, I'm going off on a tangent here. Our first grant said, here, you can have the money. The second grant says, oh, you're making capital improvements. You have to match it. So the first grant was, here, you can have it. The next one is, you got to equal the amount spent, which we did the first time anyway. So I'll remember that now easily. Match grant. And as I said, Natalie Johnson had a lot to do with getting that started and getting it passed. I don't know if you remember. It passed like 20 votes. It was, what was it, 2010 to 1980? It was like such a, what?
I think it passed by
2 votes. It was so close. It was so close. So again, why is there stucco on this building? Why is there a new roof at the Manitou Heritage? Why is there a new hallway at the? Why is there a new hallway at the Miramont Castle? Here's a complaint, but it's a compliment. Because the Miramont Castle got a match grant, they renovated the hallway, the Grand Hall, where Rockey had 40 paintings. So they called up and says, hey, we're renovating it because of a match. They didn't say that, but you need to come get your Rockey paintings. So that was a task. But anyway, the Miramont Castle has a very nice new grand hallway on the 4th floor.
Did they put the paintings back?
They didn't put the paintings back. And I think sort of rightly so, Christine, because it's a history museum. In a way, Rockey, I don't feel like matched the rest of the collection there. Yeah.
Do we know why there's tin on the back? It's actually really cool looking, but a lot of those buildings on the back side.
You're talking about this corrugated stuff?
Tin, yeah. That metal, yeah.
You can cover a lot of ground inexpensively,
It was cheap.
rather than have to go in and dig. So there are a lot of buildings that have that corrugated. So by the way, Lover's Lane, it's not very upscale looking, is it? It's kind of funky in places along Lover's Lane, isn't it? Barker House, library. The Stagecoach Inn is soon to become Authentic. Does anyone have any idea what Authentic is? Is it a restaurant or? You'd hope it's a restaurant. It's what?
She's gonna have some yoga, and she's gonna have like maybe a small vegan cafe,
Cool.
and I think some jewelry and soaps, things, just.
Soaps, yoga, vegan.
So a different owner.
It sounds 21st century
Yes,
to me.
it's a different owner finally. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yay!
So, by the way, the owner was the son of Bozina. Bozina has a European cafe on Colorado Avenue, and I helped them with their website a little bit. So that's a connection there. So through this, when the other owner was there, I got connected to Bozina. The church. And then here we are at these pictures here again of the bridges. So many cool bridges in Manitou Springs. Here's up on Washington Avenue where you can look down on it. And Ken and Tina, again, I keep referring to them. I said, do you have any stories about you and Rocky painting? And they say, yeah, one time, not one time, but many times, we would go painting and there'd be a sign that says, keep off the grass or stay out. And Rocky would always say, that doesn't mean us, doesn't mean for artists. Artists can get on the grass. So Rocky would sometimes trespass or get on the grass to make a picture. So here we have beautiful vistas, and so Manitou Springs is very paintable. This is a detail of a picture that he painted, and then here's another view. Okay. I think I already showed those. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Yes?
If he didn't sell his paintings, how did he make his money?
He was a retired art teacher, and he lived very, very, very frugally. In fact, his bed was supported by cardboard tubes.
Because
That's just one example.
paint is really expensive. I mean, canvas
Yeah,
is really expensive.
yeah.
So it's
He
just,
he did sell some prints out of his print room, not that many, but I think for the most part it was through his retirement, and he was just very super frugal. He did not spend a lot on much except his artwork and his canvas and things like that. Yeah, good question. Yes.
Question too. So you said some people, you're still looking for some of his art. So because it was loaned out and they're not returning it, or you said
Several times, about once every 5 or 6 years, since 2001, 3 or 4 people will volunteer and say, let's get that stack of Post-it notes and envelopes that have people's names on it and call these people. And so that's happened a couple of different times. And I was with a group or a few people that did it about 4 or 5 years ago. We called a bunch of people. We got somebody saying, sure, we'll take it back. So we have retrieved a few. But other people say, I no longer live here, or it's mine, or they don't reply. So there has been effort made to do that, but it is a known issue since 2000, a long time. Yeah.
So you were saying that in the museum they have prints or whatever
Yes.
for sale.
Yes.
So, Rocky painted a picture of my house, so I could take a picture of the picture.
Yes.
And if they had it on file, I could get a print of it.
You could do what with it?
Buy a print of.
We haven't gone to the point of customizing what we have offered. We had a bunch of existing posters inventory from before, and then we've taken some of his imagery, digitized it, and printed out. And so we're not doing customized printing. However, Dick Schmidt, a good friend of his, has a piece of property that he did a painting of, and we did a digital print of it for Dick Schmidt. So that is potentially in the future. So you want to get...
What's in the Olive Branch down in Colorado Springs.
Okay, yeah, that's another place he had work downtown. Yeah. Let me real quick show you a couple things about the Rocky Art Museum. This is the Rocky Art Museum sign. We're open Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then this is what it looks like now. In the back of the space was an arch, and the arch was unfinished, and because of an MACH grant, we have refinished the walls in the back. Doesn't that look great? And so what we've done here, this is the stairs going down. These are self-portraits over here. Here's a local scene pictures, but we put some of the fantasy pictures on this back wall. So what the MACH interior grant allowed us to do was to expand the area that is displaying work. We've got to finish some unfinished work. And so take a look sometime, drop by, you'll see Lana. This is Lana, and this is the print room behind her, and so she is, this is the print room. So somebody talks about how do you fund the library. It's got a great location. There's always people walking by. And so Lana will invite people in, tell the Rocky story. show interesting things, and so we have prints and posters and etchings and things like that for
Did
sale.
he do his own framing?
He did some of his own framing. He did send some of it out later on to Orly's, which is a frame shop, and it's interesting to get ready for the show. I had to, in some of the cases, reframe or improve framing. So, yes, he did. Yeah. So I think that's it for now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.